You guys are now the jury. Am I guilty or not guilty of heresy?
Heretic.
Yeah, absolutely guilty.
Welcome back, everyone, to yet another episode of Zillennial Money. This is episode 62, and we have all of our regular hosts back today for a full show. And yeah, there's lots to cover, so let's not waste any more time and jump right into it. So first story I wanted to talk about tonight is Bitcoin mining. I know like the Bitcoin mining companies, for those invested in it, have not had a great time over the past, half a year or so, but Bitcoin mining is actually alive and well and thriving, at least for the past little bit. But the story that I wanted to cover tonight was actually we recently had a pretty significant dip in the total network hash rate. So I'm just trying to get to the end of it, get to the bottom of it, and figure out why. So the network hash rate recently, it dropped to as low as 690. Now, I did check right before we began the show, and it's back up to around 1,000 exahash, which is 1 zettahash, right? So we're back up to like where it was before, but for a while it was in the 600s exahash, which is like a 35% drop from the top, which is quite significant. And we're just trying to figure out what the what the explanation for that is. But I know, Tristan, you raised your hand. Did you have something to add before I jump further into this story?
Yeah, just on the front of the Bitcoin mining stocks, I do want to say that some of them are doing all right. Iron has actually is getting quite close to its 52-week high. So it's not all bad news on the Bitcoin mining companies, just most of them.
Yeah, no, with Iron, I think maybe it has something to do with their AI business more so than it has to do with Bitcoin mining. I was kind of hoping that the Bitcoin mining specifically, like that aspect of the business, would be the one that attracts capital. But so far, I've been wrong on that. I would fully admit it hasn't been the case. But that is not to say that it'll never catch on. But I really do think that there is tremendous value in Bitcoin mining, as exemplified by the hash rate keeps on climbing and people keep on plugging in. But we're actually talking about maybe the hash rate drop this week, and let's dive deeper into why this is the case, where the Bitcoin hash rate suddenly dropped by like 30%. And in fact, if you look at mempool.space, which is like the official kind of like the biggest blockchain explorer for Bitcoin, it's estimating, I think I checked right before the show earlier today, that is estimating that the difficulty is going to drop by 7.5% on the next difficulty adjustment for Bitcoin, which is in like 2 days, by the way. It's like this weekend. And then that should make it easier for, people, both individuals and companies, to mine more Bitcoin. But yeah, back to the original question, why the drop? So this person, Lysander, proposed the theory that it was Iran who was mining Bitcoin in the mountains. So I'm not sure if you guys are caught up on the politics news, on geopolitics, but there was a pretty significant escalation in the Middle East over the past week or two between Israel and Iran. I'm not gonna get like super deep into it, but basically, like Israel and the United States and most of the Western world, they really don't want Iran to have a nuclear weapon, but Iran's been secretly developing, or not so secretly developing, I guess, nuclear weapons. So Israel finally had it enough, and then they just bombed a lot of the Iranian nuclear sites, and then the United States also joined in on one of the strikes to hit this mountain facility called Fordo that was that's buried deep in the mountains. That's like really hard for regular munitions to hit. So that was it's like, as far as I'm aware, the first time in a very long time that the United States has ever taken direct action against the Iranian regime, which is, obviously a big escalation. And Israel's also destroyed a lot of infrastructure in Iran, which means that, if Iran was mining Bitcoin, maybe like if they got their power grid disrupted and stuff like that, they had to shut down some of their miners. That could explain the drop. But I've also seen other explanations that are not quite out there, that are simpler. That's just, North America recently, the northeastern part, it includes Ontario too, like Ontario, but most of Northeast United States got hit with a heat wave. So maybe that was part of the issue as well, where people turn on their ACs, which means that power demand goes up, which means that power gets more expensive. So the miners have to turn off their machines because it's not profitable if the electricity rates go up. I don't know. There's lots of explanations. So part of the question for tonight is just, I want to hear you guys' maybe thoughts and explanations on why the hash rate dropped and then went back up. Do you think it was Iran, or do you think it was just, people turning off their miners because of the heat wave? Or what's your thoughts on it? But before I pass it off to you guys, there is a part 2 to this story, and the part 2 is not really, I don't really have a question on it. I just wanted to promote the idea of solo mining. So as you guys know, I've been talking to you guys about it in our group chats. I recently bought a lot of these BitAxe miners. So BitAxe, if you guys don't know, if our audience don't know, is an open source project where they want to decentralize Bitcoin mining. So they made these machines, and these chips that go into these BitAxe machines are very small, by the way. They're like a little bigger than a credit card. And these chips that go into the BitAxe miners, they're the same chips that go into the Ant miner. I think the one that I have, though I have more than one, but like the ones that I have, the BitAxe Gammas, the chip that goes into those is the same chip that goes into the Ant miner S21 Pro. And those chips are very efficient. They use about 17 watts per terahash. And yeah, as you can see, included a picture of it. I have 5 of the BitAxe Gammas, and then each one of them produces about 1 to 1.1 terahash per second, which, if just to give you an idea, if you go and you mine Bitcoin in a pool, you can earn about 50 sats per day, which is not a lot, right? That's worth like 5 cents US per day if you're mining. So that's why I don't have them on pooled mining. So there's an option where you can go solo, which means that if you win a block, you win the whole block. So right now the block reward is 3.125 Bitcoin. So you have a chance at winning 3.125 Bitcoin, although it's a very small chance. Most, like 99.9999% of the time, you're just going to earn nothing. But on the off chance that you win, you could win, 3.125 Bitcoin, which is worth over 300,000 US dollars. And since I live in Canada, if you convert it to Canadian Canuck pesos, that's going to be worth over 500,000. So it's quite a nice chunk of change if I win. And if you go to sololuck.com, I think it's .com, this is a calculator on how big your chances are of winning a block if you're solo mining. So all my BitAxes combined that you see there is about 6x or 6. I wish it was 6 exahash. It's 6 terahash, which is gives you about 1 in 1 million chance per day of winning a block, which it doesn't sound like a lot, and it's not. But if you compare it to the lottery, it's like magnitudes better, right? I think the Lotto 649, which is the official kind of like the most famous lotto in Ontario that's run by the government, if you buy that one, if you buy a ticket, it's $3 per play, and your chances of winning the jackpot is like 1 in 30 million. So with 5 or so bid axes, you can get that chance to 1 in 1 million for a 300,000 or 300,000 US. So that's about 500,000 Canadian dollars per day of winning chances. So I think that solo mining is just so much better than playing the lottery. Like if you've ever played the lottery, don't like just go solo mine Bitcoin. That's my opinion. And also, there's one more thing. There's a thing called parasite pool. I'm not sure if you guys have heard of it. It's kind of a hybrid system between pooled mining and solo mining, because I know people like solo mining because of the chance to win big, but then your chances are kind of small, and most of the time you're going to earn absolutely nothing. But then if you pool mine, then you don't have a chance to win the jackpot at all, and then you're making like 50 sats per day per terahash. It's not a lot, right? So parasite pool is doing something interesting, which is if you win a block, then you only get 1 Bitcoin out of the 3.125, and then the remaining 2.125 plus transaction fees gets split among everyone else who's in the pool, who's in parasite pool, according to their hash rate that they contributed. So it's not a completely, like, if you win 1 Bitcoin, I think that's still life-changing money, right? Because it's 100,000 US dollars. But it's not like you still win a life-changing amount of money, but if someone else in the pool wins and then you contributed hash rate, then you still get something, right? You're not going to get a lot. You're going to get maybe like $20. You're going to get $30. You're going to get maybe at most $100 if you contributed quite a bit of hash rate. But, like $100 will get you, like, will pay for your electricity bill for the month. So this is kind of like what I'm doing with the bidax gammas that you see there. I'm mining using parasite pool. So yeah, I don't know, 1 per 1 million chances. And actually my chances are a little bit less, because as you can see by those dips in the historical hash rate, I have them plugged into a smart plug that flips a timer, because I live in Ontario, and electricity in Ontario's, they have the on peak and off peak, right? So during the day is on peak, and then in the middle of the night is off peak. So I actually have them switched off in the middle of the day and switched on at night. So I only mine at night when electricity is cheap. That way I don't, blow out the electricity bill. But you don't have to do this. Like, you can just keep them on. But as you can see, I turn them off from time to time, and it's just on an automatic timer. So it's really easy for you to set that up. If you just, buy like a $5 smart plug, that's like if you want to, but you don't have to. So anyways, there's no question like posed in this section. I just wanted to kind of advertise the idea of solo mining. And I guess maybe one question is, would you guys be interested in getting into this bidax solo mining game, or are you okay just sitting out? But anyways, that's it for the first story. Just those two parts, the hash rate, first of all, drop, and then rebound. What do you guys think of it? And then if you have any comments on the idea of solo mining and home mining and stuff like that.
The hash rate drop has been interesting. I'm more skeptical of the idea that people are turning it off in like North American, Northeastern markets as a result of like air conditioners being used. But it did happen during the heat wave, so I guess it's possible that like big miners were asked to shut off by certain grids. But so that is like a possibility. Like some miners will work with the grid, as like in the grids will, when they have power surge issues, they'll ask big producers or big users of electricity to shut off their factories and that kind of stuff. So I guess it is possible that the heat wave coordinating with big miners in the Northeast is causing the hash rate drop. I also think that it's been an open secret for a while that Iran's been mining Bitcoin, and it happened right around the time that that the attack happened. And yeah, I mean, a part of Iran's power grid could have been wiped out, and it just kind of makes sense that their miners got shut off. So, I mean, there's two different theories. I'm sure there's probably other theories going on. Overall, nothing. It doesn't concern me. It's just something that happens in Bitcoin. Sometimes hash rate drops very rapidly, but something to watch out for and see. Like I don't assume that the price will follow the drop in hash rate, but sometimes it does. So we'll see what happens. But overall, I think that there's going to be that difficulty adjustment, and hash rate will probably be higher in 2 to 3 months than it was at its peak. Anyways, that's kind of my expectation with that. In terms of the solo mining, I'm actually a big fan of the BitX project. I've had a couple of BitXs plugged in for over a year now. I think it's a great project. I think it's really great to introduce open source to the mining area of Bitcoin, because it's only basically controlled by like 2 big companies out of China, and then also the mining pools are very much dominated by just a few companies. So that level of centralization is a bit of a risk in Bitcoin. There are some Bitcoin miners that dismiss it as a risk, but I think any centralization is a risk to Bitcoin. So I think that any project that's working on like open source, which is very much a part of the Bitcoin ideology, and I think that more competition is good. I think it's actually these kinds of projects are actually creating incentives for even innovation in the mining pools. Like Andy mentioned, one of the miners. There's also Ocean Mining, which is an open source mining pool that has a better algorithm for sharing revenues with their miners. So, and then the other great thing about BitX is they are looking into like the chip side of things. So they want to work with Block, because Block wants to do a lot of like mining open source projects. They want to build miners. I think Block is interested in the retail market for people who can plug and play miners in their own homes. And then BitX, I've actually talked to a few of the BitX people, like Scott. He just goes by Scott. He's on X, and I met him in Montreal last year, and we talked a lot about it. And he said they're interested in actually using Block's future open source chips, because right now what they do is they buy like S21s and they strip the chips right off. As Andy said, they're the same chips. So I actually think that there's a lot more innovation coming in this space, and I have a lot of hopes for the BitX project.
I think that it's likely a combination of factors. I think the heat wave was definitely a major impact, and on that front, I don't think it's just that the heat wave would have resulted in the miners being asked to turn off their mining kind of thing. I think it's also the fact that miners generate a lot of heat, and when there's a combination of heat and many miners running in one spot, there's the chance of overheating and damaging equipment. So I think I wouldn't be surprised if there would be a lot of mining companies and miners in general who opted to turn off their miners regardless of whether or not they were asked to or not, purely because they were like, if I don't, it will overheat and break something, and that will cost me more money than missing a couple hours of or a day or whatever of mining time. So I think that's also an aspect, especially if it's hot enough that it overpowers the capacity of like air conditioning for the Bitcoin mining facilities to regulate the temperature within there. So, which is quite possible if it's hot enough. Like if it overheats if it overpowers the AC, then you're cooked. Literally. With regards to the Iran, maybe some of it is. I don't know how much is or isn't going to be contributed to that, but I think that we know for sure that there is a lot of mining that was happening in the eastern U.S. and in Canada, and that they had a major heat wave, and that does cause a reduction in people mining in general during that time frame. So I don't know how much of that will be as a result, like how much of the drop in exahash would have been a result of that, and how much would be a result of the anything to do with Iran. There also tends to be some fluctuation with the hash rate in general, due to a multitude of reasons. So it's also possible that other weather effects that were not as big news or known to us was also happening across the world that caused some other places to reduce their mining. You know, if there was a heat wave in another part of the world as well, miners there might have been turned off for a bit as well, that we wouldn't be taking into account. So I wouldn't be that surprised if some of it is just a result of some of it is related to Iran's mining capacity, but I doubt that Iran has enough hash rate themselves to be like the entirety of this or a large part of it. So on that front, like who really knows exactly what they have in the books there, but the fact that it's rebounded relatively quickly, I feel like suggests that the majority was not related to Iran, since from my understanding they're still not exactly up to full capacity as they would have been in prior to the conflict. And with regards to BitX and all those good stuff, I think it's, you know, something like fair enough. If people want to do that and mine away, that is up to them. I have run mining in the past, and you know, gotten the benefits from some of that, but not so much on the BitX front. But I did have a Ethereum miner there, and I was mining on some graphics cards back in the day. So I understand there's some appeal to it. And I think that it's good to have the mining for Bitcoin in general be more decentralized, since that is the biggest weakness of Bitcoin, I would say, is the fact that you could theoretically have a full centralization where some cartel of entities gets more than 50% of the hash rate, in which there is a threat to Bitcoin. But I think that in general, that's kind of not that big of a risk in some respects, because if they did get 50% of the hash rate and then push through false transactions and such, one, that would be extremely, extremely expensive. And two, by pushing through false transactions, you would have basically just been like, Bitcoin's worthless now, in which case your false transactions would have cost you however much Bitcoin you would have had in the first place, because it would tank in value. So it just seems to me like there's not a humongous incentive to do that, but you know, maybe people are stupid. So either way, decentralization is not a bad strategy, just to reduce the chance of people being stupid, which is, you know, always a problem in this world. So I think I don't know if I will necessarily start running the BitXs, just purely because I use seasonal solar for solar panels, and it bumps up my electrical rate quite high. So as a result of that, it would be a lot more expensive for me to run the BitXs than I think makes them worth it. Like, it would be, you know, at normal price, I think it's like under $5 a month, and you basically have to 3 times that. And at like $15 a month, I feel like for each BitX, you know, you're getting to the cost of the BitX in like a few months. So I don't know if it will be. I don't think it would be super worth it from my perspective, but I can understand why. You know, if you're running it at like the $5 a month, like it's like, you know, whatever. Like, because honestly, I was looking at it with my normal rate, it's under $5 a month. So that would be pretty good. Like that, at that point, it's like basically not really a problem, especially if you're running it in the winter, etc., or in some place that's usually cold. So like a basement or something, and you're just trying to warm that area up anyway. Like I used to run my miner right beside a pipe that had frozen in the past, because I was like, we're gonna keep this bad boy nice and warm with the power of mining. If you can have the heat generated by the mining also provide some, that's also a good thing in my opinion, since normally it's just kind of wasted. It feels a little bad to be running AC to cool your miners, in my opinion. I'd much rather, you not turn on the heat because you're running miners, for example, kind of thing. But that's kind of my thought process on it all.
Yeah, I don't know like your situation, Tristan, because I know you live in Alberta and the electricity rates are different. But here in Southern Ontario, you'd be surprised actually. Southern Ontario, that's maybe one thing that Ontario has like a decisive advantage over Alberta, is that the energy here in Ontario is relatively cheap comparatively, and it's also, dare I say, cleaner, because Ontario uses a lot more nuclear and hydro. And in fact, it's so prevalent, like hydroelectricity is so prevalent in Ontario that Ontarians call their electric bill the hydro bill, which never made any sense to me because the hydro bill is the water bill for me, right? Because like people keep on saying like the hydro bill, and I keep on thinking that it's the water bill. But if you hear an Ontario person say hydro bill, they actually mean the electricity bill, because hydroelectricity is so prevalent that people just call it the hydro, right? But it's not just hydro. I think it's like 40 or 50% nuclear, and hydro makes up another like 40%. So it's like 90% renewable at this rate if you count nuclear as renewable, which I do. But yeah, like electricity's not too expensive. I think I did the math, and if on my schedule also I run it on off-peak time, so in the middle of the night, which if I do that schedule where I'm only mining like 50% of the time, then it's like $2 or $2 to $3 per month per bidax. So I am paying maybe like $15 more per month extra running the bidaxes just collectively, but it's not going to be a significant noticeable increase in the hydro bill. But yeah, somebody raised their hand.
Yeah, I was just gonna comment. Like, it's not a profitable way of getting Bitcoin, but like it is like a way of getting your hands on some Bitcoin that isn't tracked through like if you buy Bitcoin in exchange, like technically the Canada Revenue Agency is tracking it, could track it. They probably are tracking it. So I mean, there's ways of acquiring a little bit of Bitcoin where it's not KYC. Now I'm not condoning it or telling anybody to do that, but like mining Bitcoin with a BitX does give you like passive Bitcoin that can be used tax-free in the future. And the way I like to think about it is that like it is cheaper for me to just go buy Bitcoin straight up. But if I'm doing it this way, it's kind of like a tax. Like, should I pay like capital gains tax on the sale of my Bitcoin in the future, or should I mine a little bit and I can like do things like buy iPhones and little things every few years by mining little itty bits of Bitcoin here and there, and essentially I pay like a 10% tax on it rather than paying like what I would pay as a capital gains. So that's one aspect of it, is like there is a benefit to it as long as you're willing to hold the Bitcoin for a decent amount of time. The other aspect of it is just educational and it's fun. Like, I'm not mining a lot of Bitcoin. Like, even if the government found out how much of it was tax-free that I was earning, it, I don't think they really would come after people like me. But mine enough Bitcoin to buy yourself like electronics for tax-free. It's kind of an incentive, and The other incentive is that it's just it's educational. You learn about the network, and it's a very cheap way of doing that because running like an S21 is very expensive in your home. And you probably need to get like much more. You have to get to hire an electrician probably to like update your circuit box and everything. So this is a very cheap and easy way to get yourself educated on Bitcoin mining, even if you only do it for a short period of time to say you mine Bitcoin. I think it's like kind of important in like the education of Bitcoin to say you mined a little, just so you got your feet wet a little bit.
Yeah, and also on that note, one last thing I'll add, and then we'll move on. I'm going to say something that might be considered heresy, so don't burn me at the stake for this. But as you can see from my picture, notice how I only mentioned the 5 BitAxe gammas. But I'm sure some of you are wondering, what are you doing with the BitAxe Hex, which is the shoebox looking one? And on that note, I'm actually using that one to mine Bitcoin Cash, which I know for Bitcoiners, y'all just collectively cringed. But listen to me, right? Like, before you burn me at the stake, like, here's why. Listen to me explain myself, right? So if you do the math, Bitcoin Cash right now is, I think it was like $300 or $400 per BCH last time I checked, and the block reward is the same, right? 3.125 BCH, which works out to like over $1,000 US if I win the block reward. And if you look at the BCH network, because like no one really cares about it, and so the total network hash rate is very low. So if I'm solo mining BCH, I could actually like have a much higher chance of winning a block if I'm mining BCH rather than BTC. Now I know like Bitcoiners will get mad because this, like, I'm technically supporting BCH, which is a knockoff version of BTC, which is like, you know, a scam version of Bitcoin, as people call it. Like, I get all of that, right? Like, I understand that. I'm a Bitcoiner. I don't like really support BCH, but like if I win, I'm gonna sell the BCH and buy BTC with it, or buy more BitAxe to mine BTC with it, right? But my line of thinking is that, like, since I stand as such a higher chance of winning Bitcoin Cash, then, you know, like, I might just I'm gonna mine it, and then if I win, then I'm gonna use the cash. I'm gonna sell the Bitcoin Cash, and then I'm gonna use the cash that I get from selling the Bitcoin Cash to buy more BitAxes to help support Bitcoin, the real Bitcoin, even more. So that's me explaining myself. Now, you guys are now the jury. Am I guilty or not guilty of heresy?
Heretic.
Yeah, absolutely guilty. But if you turn it into Bitcoin, that's cool. If I find out you got Bitcoin Cash on your ledger just sitting chilling there for a rainy day, I'll have to report you to the authorities.
Anyways, the next story. So let's move on to the wonderful world of American politics. It seems like every day there is something new, and you guys are going to have to get used to that because we're living in kind of the Trump 2.0 version of America, where American politics is front and center every day. But this story actually doesn't have that much to do with Trump himself for once. This story is about New York City, which, if you guys don't know, they just had their Democratic primary for the next mayor of New York City. And this was a closely contested race. So I know people like are saying that, oh, the real election, the actual mayoral election is in November. But the way that it works in New York is that New York is such a Democratic leaning city. So it's such a Democratic leaning place that whoever wins the Democratic primary is basically going to be the mayor, right? Like, there's not really any chance that the Republican candidate is going to win. Because like the vote is always like 80-20 or at most 70-30. Like, it's probably going to be whoever wins the Democratic primary, which is why people consider the Democratic primary to be the actual New York City race. And the New York City mayor race this year for the Democratic primary was between self-described socialist candidate Zohran Mamdani. Sorry, keep on mispronouncing his name, Mamdani, and a former New York State governor Andrew Cuomo, who's considered more of, I guess, a moderate traditional Democrat versus the heavily far left progressive socialist Mamdani, and yeah, like Mamdani has like a better, like he's younger and he has more appeal online, and people are saying that this contributed to what happened this past Tuesday, which was Mamdani won the primary, right? So he has a good chance of becoming the next New York City mayor. In fact, unless something crazy happens, he's probably gonna get in. And this was kind of a shock because the old like Democratic establishment, they rallied behind Andrew Cuomo because he was the guy, right? Like the most kind of traditional cookie cutter Democrat you could think of, like who was the established politician, career politician, former governor, but yeah, it wasn't meant to be, I guess. And then the people voted for Mamdani. And the reason why this is a little bit concerning to me is due to some of his stances, right? I know, like, I'm biased on this, and everyone's biased on this. And as you guys know, I'm not a big fan of the far left kind of movement. And this is part of the reason why, I used to be somewhat supportive of the Democrats, especially back in the Obama days. But I feel like lately the Democrats have just gone way too far left. And this Mamdani thing is just a whole another, it's just another example of how the Democrats are moving further and further to the left, when I think the answer should have been the opposite. They should move back to the center, but that's not what they're doing. But why are people calling Mamdani far left, right? So here's a list of some of the things that he himself posted on Twitter. Now, granted, this was back like 5 years ago, but still, like, I don't think he's changed on too many of these stances. So he posted a list of things that he wants to do once he's mayor. So he wants to end cash bail. He wants to repeal the walking while trans ban. I literally never heard of this, but okay. He wants to decriminalize sex work, legalize marijuana, permit safe injection sites, restrict solitary confinement, enact elder parole, re-enfranchise incarcerated New Yorkers, decriminalize simple drug possession, repeal all mandatory minimum sentences, reduce maximum sentences with retroactive effect, repeal felony bump-up statutes, repeal sentencing enhancements, and end cooperation with ICE. So yeah, this is again, I'm actually not against 100% of this list, but a lot of the things on this list are extremely concerning to me. And I'll go into reasons why later, but let me just finish the rest of the segment first. And then maybe you guys can chime in, and then I'll add my opinion at the end, right? But the latest kind of list of promises, at least the ones that have been featured on the news after the election, and after it's apparent that he won the primary, he repeated a lot of the promises that he's gonna, once he's mayor, he's gonna, introduce no-cost childcare. He's gonna send baby baskets to newborns, and then he's gonna raise the minimum wage to $30. So remember, back in the day, there was the fight for 15. That was kind of the movement of the left in America, that they need a $15 minimum wage. And then, a lot of Democrats were elected, and then they did push for that. And then a lot of places did actually get $15 minimum wages. But then now, because of inflation, obviously, because of money printing, it's being raised to 30. So yeah, I think this is just it's a never-ending cycle, right? Like soon $30 minimum wage is not going to be enough if you live in New York City, but that's just my opinion. right? And yeah, as to why people voted for Mamdani, again, I alluded earlier that maybe he's a lot better at the social media game compared to the traditional like old school politician Democrats like Andrew Cuomo. But another reason is actually Mamdani had a lot of support among middle and higher income New Yorkers compared to lower income. So Geiger Capital posted this, where this is like, if you look at how people voted based on income, you would think that the lower class, like people who make less money, the working class, you would think that they would have be more tended towards voting for the socialists, right, or the more left-leaning candidate, and then the people who are in the financial, because New York is the financial hub of America, right? Like people who are in the Wall Street, hedge funds, and big companies and stuff like that, they would be more tended to vote for the more moderate. But what we saw was actually the exact opposite, where the working class, the lower income people, voted for Andrew Cuomo by a 13-point margin. But that wasn't enough for him to win, because the middle income, like the middle class, and then the higher income people, all voted for Mamdani by double-digit margins. So it seems like the lower class was actually outvoted. And then Geiger Capital put it pretty nicely, pretty beautifully, I think, where he says the rich elected a socialist on behalf of the poor who didn't actually want it at all, and they'll never feel the consequences, because it's the lower class who's going to feel all the tax hikes and all the stuff that's going to come. And in my opinion, Mamdani seems like he's going to be really soft on crime, which the rich, they live in these like highly secure high-rise buildings with dedicated security guards, and then the lower income don't have that luxury, so they're going to be more affected by the crime. And yeah, Garry Kasparov, the world chess champion, or former world chess champion, one of the smartest people alive, I would say, has said that socialism is like polio. It comes back when people forget about the horrible damage it did last time. Again, that's his opinion. Obviously, everyone has their bias. Dean Phillips, the Democratic congressman from Minnesota, who I would say is one of the more moderate Democrats, who raised the alarm about Joe Biden. It's like health conditions a long time before the 2024 election happened. He said that Democrats wishing to lose the 2026 midterms should promote a 33-year-old socialist devoid of executive experience for mayor of America's largest city, and impeach a president who ended a tyrannical regime's nuclear threat while achieving a ceasefire days later. So again, we're not going to talk about the Iran-Israel stuff that he's alluding to, but yeah, again, the first part of what he said, the 2026 midterms is going to happen next year, right? And then the Democrats seem to not want to move towards the center. Instead, they want to promote, a far left socialism, in my opinion, right? And this is kind of the sentiment that's being echoed by Dean Phillips as well, who's a Democrat again, by the way, but he's one of the more moderate Democrats, right? So again, lots of opinions and lots of people kind of reacting strongly regarding the Mamdani victory online. But my question to you guys is, what do you guys think? Is the reaction kind of overblown? Do you think it's going to be fine? Or do you think New York City is really going to turn into the woke hellhole that people are, kind of fear-mongering that it is? Or maybe not fear-mongering, maybe it's predicting. So, yeah, lots of opinions here. And I'll save my opinion for kind of the end, but I'm curious to hear what you guys think first.
I guess I'll get started. I'll start off by just mentioning, like, I haven't been following the New York mayor race at all. I until it got in the news recently. My understanding is that like Eric Adams, who's the current mayor of New York, and he's a Democrat, he had some issues. Like potential corruption issues, which I'm not going to comment on because I haven't really read into it. But he got into a little bit of trouble, and he decided he was still going to run for mayor, and he decided to run as an independent because he's kind of been like, I guess, more of like a moderate Democrat who's been warring more with this side of the party, the more like base, like far left voters, which I guess are very, very powerful in like the New York constituency. And like Eric Adams is still running for mayor as an independent. He's the incumbent. So like, I think that the way the media and like the way people on like X have been like reporting on, talking about this issue, are like have already like crowned Zohran mayor. I don't think that we should be like counting out Eric Adams here. Like Zohran is not just gonna run for mayor against the Republican. He's gonna run against the current mayor of New York, and New York has had a pretty decent history recently of electing independents. This isn't the first time that New York has like elected far left people. That's why he kind of had like guys like Rudy Giuliani, who's a Republican, Mayor Bloomberg, who was like a Republican / independent, ran the city for so long, because I don't think that these kinds of like far left Democratic parties are actually that popular with like moderate New York voters. So I think that this is a situation where like potentially like the moderate New York voters who are going to support Eric Adams probably didn't participate as much in this primary. And I think that if I was to guess, I think Eric Adams is still going to squeeze out a win. I don't think that I think the majority of people in New York City are Democrats anyways. I don't think they care about the loyalty of the party name, as long as they think that the independent mayor, Eric Adams, is Democratic enough. They're probably still going to vote for him. So I'm not really in the mindset of that Zohran is going to become the mayor of New York just because he's a Democrat. I think that the race is going to be
interrupt you a bit there. Are you willing to bet on this on Polymarket? Because if you're convinced that Eric Adams can still pull off a win, then you can make a lot of money on Polymarket. So I'm gonna check real life.
Yeah, sure. I didn't check the odds actually. I'm curious if they're showing like a slight, the odds are a slight victory for Zohran, and Eric Adams has like a 30% chance of winning. I'm gonna vote on him because I think he'll win. And I just want to also point out something that's kind of cool, is that the guy who's running for the Republican is I don't actually know that much about the guy, but he always wears a red hat, and I was actually curious why he always wears a red hat. And he's actually like one of the founders of a famous New York City vigilante group called the Guardian Angels, and they were like really active in the 1970s, and they were actually like sick and tired of the police force like doing a bad job patrolling subways. And the Guardian Angels actually were a vigilante group of New Yorkers who wore red hats, like these like fancy red hats, and they would patrol the New York City subways and like protect citizens. And the current Republican nominee in New York, I forget his name off the top of my head, but the current Republican nominee is actually one of the founders of the Guardian Angels, and that's why he wears the Guardian Angel red hat. So I thought that's kind of cool. And my understanding right now is that there's like a push among Republicans and independents in New York to get him to step down to like basically hand a victory to the current mayor of New York. So we'll see what happens. But I'm not going to count out the incumbent. But I guess I'll wait to see what the polls say when they come out. Go on, Andy. I think you have the odds.
Yeah, the person that you're thinking of is Curtis Sliwa, who's the Republican nominee. So Curtis is at 1% chance or 0.9% chance of winning on Polymarket. But the thing that you're most interested in, I guess, is Eric Adams, which right now he's at 19.7% chance of winning the New York mayoral race in November. And Zohran Mamdani is at 74%. So, you know, if you bet on Eric Adams, it's about 20% chance right now. So it's about 1 to 5. So bet $1, you get back $5 if if he wins. So
I might make the bet. I mean,
Yeah.
I think it's going to be more competitive than people are saying it's going to be. So I might make the bet. I might be wrong. I don't know for sure, but I don't think New Yorkers are that far left. Like I've hung out in New York a lot, and they're actually very moderate people for the most part. Like yeah, they're center left, but I don't think New Yorkers are going to want to elect this kind of socialist type dude. And in past, when they have elected far left members of the Democratic Party, they always lose. They lost to Rudy Giuliani because of this kind of stuff. They lost to Mayor Bloomberg because of this kind of stuff. So like, I'm not counting out Mayor Adams. I know he got involved in some corruption stuff, so maybe that hurts him too much, and I'll end up being wrong. But I'm willing to I guess the real bet I'm willing to make is that the race is going to be way more competitive than people are saying it's going to be. And Zohran might actually still win. But yeah, we'll see. I don't think that the Curtis guy is going to win, but I do think it's cool that he was one of the founders of the Guardian Angels. I think it's actually a group I think is really cool. I've followed them for some time, and I actually think it's kind of a neat idea to have these kinds of group like patrolling cities when people lose faith in the police. But that's kind of my view on the race. What were your specific questions? I want to make sure I answer your specific questions about the topic.
My second question was, let's assume that Zohran Mamdani does win, right? So now that, let's say it's November, he wins, he's the mayor. Do you think it's going to be as bad for New York as people are saying it is? Because, like he's promising some things, in my opinion, that are pretty extreme. Like he's going to drastically soften punishments on crime, and crime is already a big problem in New York. And Elon Musk has famously described New York as Gotham City, because Gotham City was based off of New York, but now it's going to be New York is going to be based on Gotham City. Non-fiction becomes fiction, not the other way around, right? So is it actually going to be that bad, or do you think it's fear mongering and Zohran is probably not? You probably don't think he's going to do a good job if he wins, but is it actually going to be woke hell, as Trump and Elon would put it, or do you think it's going to be all right?
I think it's probably going to just be status quo. Some of his more extreme policies, or the ones that I just don't think is possible for him to actually implement, no cost for childcare and $30 minimum wage. I just don't think he's going to get that passed. Maybe he will for some things, but I think a lot of he's going to be a far left, so a lot of his agenda will just be blocked by the city legislature. On a lot of the things a lot of the things when it comes to criminal justice reform, that already happened under Mayor Adams. A lot of criminal justice reform, because he pushed these ideas in 2020. A lot of American cities, in Canadian cities and provinces or whatever, adopted a lot of these ideas on criminal justice reform already. So New York City has already gotten rid of. They've ended cash bail on a lot of charges and stuff, and it hasn't gone so well. It's been a kind of a disastrous policy, and policies on decriminalization of drugs, certain versions of that policy have already gone through in a lot of big American cities, including New York. So a lot of the things that people are pushing as dystopian or it's going to be a disaster, New York City has already pushed those policies through with the current mayor. So I don't think it's going to be a disaster. I just think he's going to be kind of like a lame duck mayor that doesn't actually get any of his real agenda through. He's just going to be a typical Democratic mayor that doesn't achieve anything. And the city will, cities like New York either do well because of external forces. It probably has nothing to do with who's the mayor. So I'm not as dramatic as a lot of people who are pushing back. I mean, overall, I'm just I'm not surprised that the Democrats are going this far left. I knew that after Trump, they would double down on a lot of their worst ideas, and I think they're doing exactly that in a lot of cities. And I think that's what this actually represents, is the Democrats doubling down on a lot of their bad ideas, including degrowth and stuff. And they're probably going to go through another election cycle where they lose a lot of seats in the House, and or they're not going to get any power back. Is my point. I think they're going to continue to lose for the next election cycle. I think they could lose another election cycle before they get some kind of economic message that actually resonates with voters. I think it's when you have these kinds of things where like the rich vote for the socialists but the poor vote against socialism, that should tell you something. I think that it's like very patronizing when rich people vote for socialism. And like you said, like a lot of these policies that might affect people negatively, they have their like ivory towers, like literally in New York. So they kind of get to avoid the worst consequences of like these kinds of criminal justice reform laws. So there's a bit of like a patronizing ivory tower thing where it's like, here, we'll just hand these people all this welfare and all this stuff. Another one that's patronizing is like a lot of like Democratic politicians will say, well, we're gonna like do criminal justice reform because black people are more incarcerated, so black people like those laws. But often black people actually feel like these are insulting laws because like not everybody in the community commits crimes. A lot of these people want to be tough on crime. Like they have very different, everybody has very nuanced viewpoints. You can't like the assumption that black voters will vote for criminal justice reform just because they might have a family member in jail and something is actually kind of an insulting assumption. So I just think that when I see this data where like rich people voting for the socialists while poor people voted against socialism, it's very telling on where the Democratic Party is. It's not actually a grassroots activist party. It's a very much a top-down party where these academics come up with these ideas, and the ideas are not coming from the grassroots organizations. And that's basically my rant about the mayor candidate.
Yeah, that's those are some great points, and I feel that the same thing's been happening. I think all across the Western world, right? In Canada, we literally have the exact same situation where if you just take a wild guess on how people voted in the New York mayor race based on education, right? It's all the upper class Ivy League school educated people that went heavily towards Mamdani. And then the people who are not college educated, they mostly went for Cuomo or other candidates, right? So
yeah, and I think there's a correlation between people who go to university and being socialists in the Western world right now. It's not like people who are socialists are not working class poor people. It's people who went to university, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah, it's like the academic elite ivory tower people, like you said, right? That think they know society the best, that think they know they're the smartest, and they think they're better than everyone. And it's like, and to an extent, like what Elon Musk said, it's suicidal empathy, right? Like they're voting for all these programs that, as you said, are degrowth. They're patronizing. They're in some ways, like a lot of ways, insulting to minorities and working class people and poor people. But they're just doing it because they may have the best intentions. They think they're doing a good thing, but they're actually kind of moving society backwards, which is the opposite of what their intention is, right? Because the whole point of progressivism is to progress, but these progressive policies are actually causing regression in society, right? Because when you're doing all this stuff like raising the minimum wage to $30 and then being super soft on crime and letting people steal, right? That's another thing. I saw like one of the Mamdani speeches. I don't know when it's from, but it's I guess relatively recently when he was on the campaign trail, where he said something along the lines of violence is an artificial construct, and we shouldn't be locking people away for stealing things from like a convenience store or like minor burglaries or whatever it is. Like, it's like, okay, like stealing from a convenience store, I can see how you can make an argument that maybe it's not a violent crime if you just steal and you don't do anything else. But like burglary is also not violence, apparently, and it's also and apparently violence is an artificial construct. Like all of this stuff just seems very extremist to me, and I just think that like it's going to be Gotham City, right?
Yeah, like I think saying the violence is an artificial construct is a very Ivy League thing to say. It's probably somebody who's never experienced violence to say something like that. And I think that like to say that burglaries should be allowed, or like you should decriminalize them, like not put people in prison for burglarizing. Like the people who actually end up suffering these kinds of policies, these like criminal justice reform policies, are like people in the poorest communities in New York. So it ends up, that's why that's why like the poorest people in the city aren't voting for this guy, like because they're the ones who've been living through these criminal justice reform policies, and their communities are the ones that actually have to like face the consequences.
Yeah, I just want to like make Zohran Mamdani spend like a week in the worst like crime-ridden neighborhood in New York City, and just make him live in like an average house in that neighborhood, and then ask him a week later, do you still want to decriminalize all this stuff, and see if his opinions change. I feel like if somebody forced him to do that, when he comes back, he'll be like, oh, maybe I'll like think twice about doing all this stuff that I promised, right? My opinion, I don't know, maybe he'll still stick by his guns, right? But yeah, anyways, I've talked a lot. Tristan, it's your turn.
Yeah, I did not follow this race at all, so I don't really have a good understanding of what any of the candidates stand for. I don't really feel qualified to give much of an opinion on this front. I would be very surprised if anything meaningful changes in New York. In my experience, politicians say a lot and achieve very little. And I suspect that will be the case here. And that is both for good things and for bad things. Politicians often say a lot of good things and then they don't follow through. And then they also say a lot of bad things and fail to follow through because politicians in general tend to be, well, it's very easy to say a lot of things that get you elected. And then when you're actually elected, not do any of those things. We see that time and time again with many different politicians. So that's kind of what I would expect to happen here. But who knows what will happen. I don't think New York is about to become a hellscape in any way, shape, or form. Which I think is the, or at least not any more than it currently is, if that makes sense. So that's pretty much all I have to say on that front.
Yeah, no, nice and concise. And what I'll have to say is that Mamdani has the opportunity to do the funniest thing. He could get, let's say if he's elected the mayor in November, he could go down as one of New York City's greatest mayors of all time just by doing absolutely nothing that he promised. That's all he has to do. And it's the easiest thing to do too. And if he just does nothing that he promised, then and just be a status quo mayor and not implement any of the far left policies, it'll be a great time, right? New York can just stay New York, and then everyone can just go home and continue on our lives as usual. Sunil, you had something you wanted to add?
Yeah, I just a side point, but like, I mean, the Democratic Party is very rudderless right now. Like, they don't have any leadership, they don't have any ideas. They're recycling the same ideas they came up with since like, I don't know, 2016. The base and the like extreme part of the party have a lot of control over it, and a lot of people are complaining that these socialists have taken over the party. But like, I just want to like push back a little bit and just make it clear that like moderate Democrats, we're here in this place because moderate Democrats like Chris Cuomo have done such a bad job like inspiring voters and coming up with an economic message that like normal middle of the road people can go for. Like, Democrats are just not attracting like reasonable moderate people to the party. And like, if you want to build a big tent, you need to be able to do that. But like, guys like Chris Cuomo and many of the other moderates of the party are doing a horrible job inspiring voters, and they're doing a horrible job coming up with an economic message that could actually like build a big tent. So this is why the extremism comes out, because that's all that's left of the party. Like, there's no ideas. Like, it's a rudderless party, and they've focused too much on like pissing off like reasonable people. It's not just like over like culture war issues. I'm talking about like they pissed off Bitcoiners, they pissed off tech people, like they pissed off a lot of people who would have regularly voted Democrat. So the smart people kind of left the party, they left the conversation. So this is what you get. You get socialism, you get like very binary choices, and you get a lot of weak leaders who are moderates who can't control the party.
Yeah, again, I also want to make a clarification, right? I totally agree with what you said, Sunil, about the Democrats just totally dropping the ball on even the moderate Democratic candidates, because like the moderates don't have anything worthwhile to say, or they don't have a vision that they're presenting. And yeah, I totally agree. So the way I see it, like people maybe have my points confused, because it seems like I'm very like anti Zohran Mamdani, and I am, but like it doesn't mean that I'm a fan of Cuomo, right? Because I think Cuomo is also like a super bad candidate to pick. Like there's not one crowning achievement that I could name about Cuomo when he was the governor of New York, right? And in fact, I think he was forced to resign over some like scandal or something. I don't remember exactly what it is because I didn't follow that story very closely. But like, as far as I'm aware, he wasn't a very good governor either, right? Like, I'm not a big fan of Cuomo at all. And I think that he would have been also a disaster, maybe like a slightly less of a disaster compared to like a far left socialist mayor. But New York was going to go nowhere with Cuomo in charge either. So
Just to
this,
add some context to his why he resigned, his exact quote was, "I'm not a pervert. I'm just Italian." Just gonna put that out there.
yeah, not a great quote. Maybe a memorable quote. Like 100 years from now, we'll look back on the legacy of New York, and then that'll be like the most memorable one. But yeah, I don't think he was such a great governor. Let's just say, right? And yeah, the way I look at this mayoral election, it's basically like if it was between Kamala Harris and AOC for like the Democratic like national nomination, right? And yeah, I'm not a big fan of either, but maybe like you could argue that Kamala Harris would have been a little bit more like moderate and neutral compared to AOC, who's very ideologically similar to Zohran Mamdani. And in fact, AOC is from New York, right? So they campaign together all the time back in on the campaign trail. So yeah, it's a weird dynamic. It's a weird place that the Democratic Party is in right now, and I don't know like what they could do to fix this situation, because it just seems like I'm not saying that Trump is perfect either, but they keep handing Trump these like easy victories, right? Like if you want to be against Trump, that's completely fine, but just present your own kind of vision and your own message that people can get behind, and the Democrats are just not doing it right now. And then they wonder why people are flooding to the Trump camp or voting third party, right? And it's just it's quite frustrating seeing this kind of stuff happen in America over and over again. And I know, Tristan, you're like, oh, I don't really care about what's happening in America and stuff like that, but and you didn't follow this race, right? But if no one else has anything to add, maybe we can move on to our final story of tonight, which I think it will be a story that, Tristan, you will have something that you will add on this story, because this last story of the night is about Canadian politics, and it's specifically about Alberta politics. So I'm not sure if you guys were aware, but at this around the same time this New York mayoral election was happening, there was also 3 by-elections on the provincial level that was happening in Alberta. And there are some results that are interesting, so let's go through them. So one of the districts that had a by-election in Alberta was this place called Old Disbury, Three Hills, which is one of the most conservative districts in the entirety of Alberta. So if you look at a map, there's Calgary, and it's all that north of Calgary, and I think it includes like Red Deer or something, and then it swings all the way back to like the eastern parts of like the rural areas just east of Calgary. So it looks like it's a large area, and it is a large area, but it's it's very sparsely populated. That's why it's all one riding. And it's one of the most conservative ridings in Alberta, which is one of the most conservative provinces in Canada. And the UCP, which is the United Conservative Party, the governing party of Alberta right now, they won 61% of the votes. Pretty easy win for the UCP in this district. But the interesting thing to note is that there's actually a new party that was just formed in Alberta called the Alberta Republican Party, or rather the Republican Party of Alberta. And we can talk about why they named it Republican Party. They're like an independence, kind of pro-independence, pro-separatism party. And people are saying that they named themselves the Republicans to like signal their willingness to join the United States. It's the 51st state. If they got their way, then they'll secede Alberta from Canada and then join America. They're saying no, like we're not like we don't want to join America. We just want Alberta sovereignty. We just want Alberta independence. But like they named their party the Republican Party, so maybe ideologically they're pretty aligned with the Republicans in the United States, I would assume. And the Republican Party of Alberta, in this by-election, they won 18% of the vote, which we can debate on whether that's good or not. People are saying that it's actually like a bad showing for them because, again, you're in one of the most conservative ridings in all of Canada, and you're in a place that is probably the most in favor of separatism that you could find, and you're only able to win 18%. You should maybe win like at least 25%, 1 in 4, or maybe 30%. So people are saying that it's a bad showing, but then again, they did win 18%. Is the third largest party in that section of Canada, just behind the NDP. So we can talk about whether there's a good showing for them or not. Now, before we do that, let's talk about the other two ridings that had by-election. So the riding that the new leader, Nasheen Nenshi, I think is his name, the former mayor of Calgary, who did not run in Calgary. He actually ran in Edmonton for this by-election to get his seat. He won pretty big victory in Edmonton Strathcona, which granted is the most left-leaning district in all of Alberta. And it was Rachel Notley's seats before. Rachel Notley was the former leader of the NDP of Alberta and the former premier of Alberta. And she retired, and then the seat became empty, and then Nenshi ran in this seat and won 82% of the vote, which is very similar to what Notley did, if I remember correctly. So it seems like, the NDP of Alberta is, happily embracing their new leader with 82% of the vote, kind of a vote of confidence. So people are saying that, it's really good. The NDP did really well here. And yeah, the last district, which was Edmonton Ellerslie, the NDP also won that district with 50% of the vote. So again, a strong showing for the NDP, actually. So people were saying that maybe the UCP had a chance here, but in the end, it wasn't close. And the Republicans, by the way, won 3% of the vote here, which is not great. But then again, it is part of the Edmonton area, and in the cities, the support for separatism is definitely a lot lower. But yeah, the Republicans won. It says 1% here, but I think after they counted it, it's like a little bit less than that. It's like 0.7 or something in Strathcona. So yeah, not a lot of support for separatism, obviously, in the big cities. But yeah, anyways, those are the three by-election that happened. And since Tristan, you're our resident Albertan here, I'm going to pass the mic off to you first on, first of all, the question is, did you follow these by-elections? And if so, what do you think of the results? Or whether you follow the election, I just presented to you the results. What do you think of the results? And do you want to comment on Alberta separatism and the Republican Party and all that stuff? So feel free to take it away.
Yep. Well, to start with, I didn't specifically follow these by-elections in detail. But the results are pretty much what I would have expected from those areas. Edmonton tends to have a pretty big NDP leaning, like downtown-ish region. And both of those two NDP seats that went for the NDP are both towards that south and downtown region of Edmonton. So that's not really particularly surprising. That area is near the university. So there's a lot of students and et cetera who are there, who do tend to be more left-leaning in general. So it's not really that surprising that they went pretty hard NDP. Regarding the old Didsbury, that is a very clearly a conservative stronghold, and I think that the Republican Party pretty much did it. Basically was completely irrelevant. All it did was take votes from the UCP, I would say. I don't think any vote for the Republican came from the NDP, really. From what I've seen, there is very little support from the left on leaving Canada or joining the U.S. at all. From the right, there is a little bit of support, but not that much. So I would say the 18% is pretty much like this is like the best performance that they might have gotten. Like there's very particularly since it's a area that's not that far from the border, so these people will have some experience with the US, and these also are people who are likely working in the oil and gas industry. Not all of them, but like there is more likely to be a portion that is working in that, since Calgary has a lot of oil and gas headquarters, etc., in the city itself, which is where that's the surrounding area around. So the fact that they basically just split the vote a little bit with the UCP, and I feel like it's clear when you look at the NDP, the two other ridings in Edmonton. I think that's a more typical result, particularly the riding for Edmonton Ellerslie, where the Republican Party basically was completely irrelevant. I would say that is pretty much what I would expect them to do pretty much all the time. There is not a tremendous amount of support for Alberta separatism. Most people have very little interest in it. They're far more just frustrated with the federal government. They're not really actually looking to join the U.S. because very, very few people that I've spoken to are even remotely interested. It's very much like a case of like, no, why would I want to do that? Why would we want to do that? And honestly, there is not that many advantages for Alberta to join the U.S. Like, you'd get access to a larger economy, and you'd sell to the exact same people. So what difference does that make? And at this point, like, there's very little reason for us to consider joining the U.S. right now, given especially the fact that there is this, even the people who are on the right side in Canada, a lot of them do not have a favorable perception of the current leadership in the States. So I would say that the portion of the population that is actually even remotely considering it is like such a small minority that like, yet like there's just not going to be enough support to even get remotely close to joining the States. And on that front, like, there's very little incentive in the sense of like, there's nothing across the border in Alberta, like from Alberta. There's no people. There's nothing in the states. Why are we joining the states so that we can drive 7 hours to the nearest town with a population of more than 100 people? Like, it's like we don't have close relationships with the states from Alberta itself in that sense. Like, it's not like Ontario where you cross a bridge in Niagara Falls and you go from or across the bridge in Windsor and you go from like a massive Canadian city to a massive American city. It's very much like we outnumber the Americans in the vicinity around us because there's just no population centers in the States nearby to Calgary, which is the largest population center near to the States. So there's not going to be a significant increase in trade that would be going through. So, and the oil we extract is already being sold to the Americans. So, like, it's like, why would you bother? Like, well, there's not really a humongous advantage from my perspective. It would really be just a case of like sticking it to the federal government, which, you know, maybe some people want to do that, but I think more people who are angry with the federal government, they're angry with the federal government. They want the federal government to be better. They don't want to leave Canada, right? They'd rather we just get better than they leave. And I think that's kind of what you're seeing, where that 18% the Republicans got was like their best case scenario in that riding, and they pretty much did like not very well, I would say, compared to like they didn't make enough to really be a significant threat. And then we can see in the typical writings they got essentially no votes. So at that point it's like this is not a real threat. And the two main cities in Alberta, Calgary and Edmonton, they are not going to be that, like, they don't really have a reason either, I would say, to consider voting Republican. Like that. It sounds like I'm talking about America. They don't have a reason to vote for this party because like they don't really have an incentive to join the states either. So it's just like the only people who are going to is like the ones with the ones who feel like oil and gas is really being hampered by the federal government, and they think America will somehow solve all their problems, which it won't. And I think that those people are few and far between. So that's kind of a little bit long-winded on that one, but I don't think there's a ton of support for this.
I mean, I don't think that like this Republican Party is going to win any elections anytime soon.
Are you muted?
Oh, sorry. Did I mute the entire time?
I heard the Republican Party is not going to win anything anytime soon.
Okay, yeah. I think that the resentment that's in Alberta is like I understand the resentment that's coming from people, but I think that they probably feel representative by the current like UCP party. So like there's no real reason for them to vote like away from the current premier or the current party, like because that party is very like gung-ho about like oil sands and about Alberta not being treated well by like Eastern Canada and all that. So like I guess there's not really an incentive to go. And then like separation is like a big ask, and it's probably something that like for it to be like actually something that becomes real, it would probably take like it probably take like many election cycles. It would have to build up over time, and the incumbent Conservative Party would have to really mess it up to like lose votes to a new party. I mean, like the UCP is already kind of a new party in that it came out of the Wild Rose and stuff. So Alberta has this like thing about throwing out the old conservatives and bringing in the new age conservatives and this kind of stuff. But like, I just don't see that. But I mean, I guess it's just a sign of resentment. I understand the resentment. I think that Tristan's right that like the problems are pretty complicated and they don't get solved just by joining America. I also think that like, even though a lot of people say like Albertans are like the most American out of Canadians, I don't actually think they are. I think Ontarians are actually the most American type Canadians. And we actually do have personal connections across the border. So I don't really buy that. All Albertans are just like Americans. They're actually not. They're very Canadian actually. Ontario people are actually a lot more American because we don't like we're the ones that don't really have like a culture. We're very much like involved in the American like culture wars and stuff. In terms of like, yeah, I don't take the party seriously. They're not really being like led by the most sophisticated people. It's all resentment. I am surprised that they still got 18%, but that's just a sign of the times. People are just pissed off and they want to like vote for like a protest candidate. So I guess that's kind of what this energy represents. So I'm not really taking like Alberta separation like seriously in a literal sense, but I do think that like we should be focusing on that resentment. Like there's reasons behind it. So Canadians should be looking to always unite and looking to like heal these wounds that have been created by regionalism in Canada. Like I'm like somebody who's like always been like very Eastern Canada focused in my Canadian politics, but like over time I have actually been somewhat sympathetic to how the Trudeau government has treated people who work in the oil sands. They're just kind of they're just very dismissive of their concerns, and like when it comes down to it, like people have their ideological issues around like oil and gas, but this is like a driving force of the Canadian economy, and we probably should be a little bit more respectful in the eastern side of Canada how we talk about people's livelihoods and jobs, and we shouldn't be so dismissive of people's livelihoods when we just like when we push these blunt policies to just shut down oil sands. Like there's people in like Eastern Canada that literally campaign on like, shutting down the oil sands. It's like, just calm down, guys. Like Canada's not going to solve climate change all on its own. There's a lot of producers of oil around the world. China basically, whatever Canada saves in climate change, China produces a new coal plant like every like 3 days. So like we're not really moving the needle. I think that this kind of politics needs to end, and that's kind of what I take from the resentment from Alberta. That we, as somebody who's like always supported this kind of degrowth ideas when I was younger, I think we should just abandon them now completely. That's why I like talking about it a lot, and that's kind of what I get when I see people voting for separation in Alberta. Is that resentment is like gradually rising, and we should just like not push for more resentment. We should find a way to be united with Western Canada because we kind of all need each other, and there's no reason for Canada to separate. It's just going to make us weaker.
Yeah, well said. And yeah, my opinion on this, and I think I actually, this may surprise you, but I agree with most of what you two both said. And I know on this show, I'm viewed as like the most, I guess maybe pro-American. I don't know about the most, but I'm viewed as maybe more on the pro-American side, especially the pro-American Republican side on many issues. But maybe you'd be surprised to hear that even though, you know, I'm probably the most likely to support an idea of potentially Alberta separation, I actually don't. And I don't support the, you know, Republican Party of Alberta. I don't think it's the correct idea. Just because I think you brought up this point on a previous episode of the show, Sunil, where you said that we were talking about like America selling all its gold to buy Bitcoin, and although it'd be great if the U.S. did something like that, you said that this was not a decision. If they did that, it would not be a decision that is of the correct temperament, right? Like you don't just like dump everything and throw out your entire kind of, you know, work that you've done just to start something new just because you're fascinated by something shinier that is supposedly better, right? I think that this is a very similar situation. I very heavily sympathize with the plight of the Albertans, of how, you know, the federal government's against the oil industry, and that's what a lot of Albertans rely on for their income. And I really get that, right? And I'm probably one of the most sympathetic people that don't live in Alberta with regards to this issue, right? And I've been heavily critical of the Liberal governments for the past years, over the past few years, about the carbon tax and all this stuff that they've done, and shutting down pipeline projects and all that stuff, right? But I just don't think that Alberta separation is a decision that is of the correct temperament. This is like if you had an argument with your wife and then you just file for divorce the next day. It's like, okay, like, let's chill a bit, right? Like, one argument is not, like, it doesn't end the marriage. Like, you shouldn't take such drastic actions because of like one or two little things that happen, right? Like, it's not, I don't think Alberta's gone to the point where the Alberta and like relationship with the federal government, I don't think it's gotten to the point where it's so like irrevocably like destroyed that you have to file for divorce, right? Like, there's and even if you do, like, even if Alberta separates, like, I'm not convinced that it's going to be better, right? So the idea of the Republican Party of Alberta was actually, like, they weren't fully advocating for joining the United States. Maybe I think they would be open to it if push comes to shove, if Trump gives them like a sweetheart deal or something, but they were advocating for just separating and going out on their own. And this is exactly, I feel like a marriage, right? Like, you have an argument with your wife, and then now you're like, oh, I hate this person now, I'm gonna divorce her, and then I'm gonna go out on my own and find a hotter, better wife. Like, it's probably not going to work out the way that you expect to. Like, the most likely conclusion is that, like, you're just going to end up alone, right? Like, that's the most likely conclusion. Like, because you're not making a decision that's of the correct temperament. And this is what I feel like that, like, some Albertans feel like they're so angry and frustrated. They're like, I'm filing for divorce tomorrow, I'm leaving, and I'm gonna, like, do perfectly well on my own, or I'm gonna find a better, hotter wife. Like, it's probably not gonna work out the way that you think, right? I just think it's a bad idea. So yeah. Anyways, that's all I have to add on that. Does anyone else have anything else they want to add on that story? If not, then we can end the show now. So. Yeah, maybe it's a little bit shorter of an episode this week, but that's okay. If you're ready, Tristan, you're our outro guy.
Thanks for watching, ladies and gentlemen. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channels. And thanks for watching. See you next time.
Have a good one.
See you next time.